March 11, 1976, Studio 6B, Burbank, California. 11:43 p.m., 50 million Americans were watching The Tonight Show when John Wayne pointed his finger at Clint Eastwood and said the words that made Johnny Carson's face go white. "You're killing the West," the studio audience gasped. Carson froze, and Clint Eastwood, the coolest man in Hollywood, for the first time in his career, you could see something flicker across his face. Not anger, not fear, something deeper. This wasn't supposed to happen. Wayne and Eastwood had never appeared together publicly. Everyone in Hollywood knew they represented two different worlds, two different versions of America, two different ideas about what it meant to be a man. And now, live on national television, in front of the biggest audience in talk show history, those two worlds were about to collide. What happened in the next 8 minutes would change both of their lives. It would change how America saw Westerns, saw masculinity, saw heroes. But most importantly, it would reveal a truth about John Wayne that nobody knew. To understand why that moment mattered, you need to understand what John Wayne represented in 1976. He was 70 years old. He'd been making Westerns for 45 years. He was America's cowboy, the straight-shooting hero who always did the right thing, always got the girl, always won the fight. He was the West as America wanted to remember it, honorable, simple, clean. But by 1976, John Wayne was a relic. The kind of Westerns he made were dying. Young audiences didn't want simple heroes anymore. They'd lived through Vietnam, Watergate, assassinations. They knew the world was complicated. And then came Clint Eastwood. Clint's Westerns were different, violent, morally ambiguous. His heroes killed without hesitation, operated in shades of gray. In High Plains Drifter, Clint played a supernatural avenger who terrorized a town. In The Outlaw Josie Wales, a man consumed by revenge. These weren't John Wayne's Westerns. These acknowledged what the Old West really was. Brutal, chaotic, merciless. Wayne hated them. In interviews, Wayne made his feelings clear. These new Westerns aren't about the West. They're about nihilism. They're tearing down everything we built. He never mentioned Clint by name. He didn't have to. Everyone knew. Clint never responded, never took the bait. He'd just smile that half smile and say, "I'm just making movies." But everyone in Hollywood knew there was tension. They'd been circling each other for years. And then Johnny Carson decided to put them in the same room. February 1976. Carson's producers had an idea. The Tonight Show needed something big, something that would make headlines. "What if we got Wayne and Eastwood together?" one producer suggested. "Put them on the same couch." Carson loved it, but his head producer was skeptical. "Wayne will never do it." "That's exactly why it'll work," Carson said. "Tension is good television." They approached Wayne first. They told him it would be a celebration of Westerns, past and present. And yes, Clint Eastwood would be there. Wayne's first instinct was to refuse, but something made him hesitate. Maybe pride, maybe a desire to defend his legacy. "I'll do it," Wayne said finally, "but I'm not going to pretend. If he's there, we're going to have an honest conversation." The producers couldn't believe their luck. Getting Clint was easier. He was 45, at the peak of his career. "Sure," Clint said. "Sounds interesting." Neither man knew what the other had agreed to. Neither was prepared for what would happen. The show was scheduled for March 11th. As the date approached, tension in Hollywood built. Everyone was talking about it. What would Wayne say? How would Clint respond? The answer would be far more complicated than anyone imagined. March 10th, 1976, the night before the taping. John Wayne sat alone in his hotel room at the Beverly Hilton. He wasn't sleeping well anymore. The cancer, his third bout, was eating at him, though he hadn't told anyone how bad it was. The doctors gave him 2 years, maybe 3. He kept thinking about Clint, about those Westerns, about what they represented. Wayne had spent his whole career creating a certain image of the West, of America, of manhood. You stood up for what was right. You protected the weak. You died with honor. His Westerns weren't just entertainment. They were instruction manuals. And now Clint Eastwood was tearing it all down. Wayne poured himself a whiskey. His hands were shaking. The truth was, Wayne understood what Clint was doing more than he let on. He'd read the reviews praising Clint's realism, his moral complexity, and deep down, Wayne knew they were right. The real West hadn't been heroic. It had been exactly what Clint showed: violent, chaotic, morally ambiguous. Wayne had spent 40 years lying about it, creating a myth because America needed a myth. But now America didn't want myths anymore. They wanted truth, and that truth was destroying everything Wayne had built. Tomorrow on national television, he was going to confront the man who represented everything he feared. Across town, Clint Eastwood was also awake, but he wasn't nervous. He was curious. He'd never met Wayne in person. He respected what Wayne had accomplished, but he didn't apologize for his own work. Let's see what the old man has to say, Clint thought. March 11th, 1976. 5 p.m., NBC Studios, Burbank. The tension backstage was electric. Everyone knew something big was going to happen. John Wayne arrived first. He walked slowly, with a slight limp he tried to hide. He looked older than 70, thinner, but his eyes were sharp. Ready. Carson greeted him personally. Duke, thanks for doing this. Wayne nodded. Where's Eastwood? He'll be here. You two will have about 15 minutes together. It'll be real, Wayne said. Something in his voice made Carson pause. Clint arrived at 6. He looked exactly like you'd expect. Lean, casual, wearing a simple suit. He moved with that effortless grace that made him a movie star. When Carson told him Wayne was already there, Clint just nodded. Looking forward to meeting him. The two men were kept separate until showtime, but the crew kept shuttling between their dressing rooms, sensing the electricity. At 11:30 p.m., they went live. Carson did his monologue. The first guest came and went, and then Carson said the words that made 50 million people lean forward. My next two guests represent the past, present, and future of the American Western. Please welcome John Wayne and Clint Eastwood. The audience erupted. Wayne walked out first, waving, smiling his public smile. Then Clint emerged. The two men met at the couch. For a moment they stood there, two legends face to face for the first time. Wayne extended his hand. Clint took it. They shook. The audience went wild. And then they sat down, and everything changed. The first few minutes were cordial. Carson asked about their current projects. They answered professionally. The audience relaxed slightly, but anyone watching closely could see the tension. Wayne's jaw was tight. Clint's eyes never left Wayne's face. Carson kept glancing between them, like a referee. So, Duke, Carson said, you've made Westerns for 4 decades. How do you feel about how the genre has evolved? Wayne leaned back. Here it was. Well, Johnny, I think the Western has lost its way. It used to be about heroism, about standing up for what's right. Now it's about something else. The audience went quiet. Carson's eyes widened. Clint's expression didn't change. You're talking about the new Westerns, Carson said carefully. The more violent ones. I'm talking about Westerns that forget what America stands for, Wayne said. He turned to look at Clint directly. Westerns where the hero is as bad as the villain, where there's no difference between right and wrong, where everything is just gray. The camera caught Clint's face, still calm, still composed, but everyone watching could see he understood. This wasn't a conversation. This was an accusation. What do you think, Clint? Carson asked. Clint smiled slightly, that famous half smile. I think the West was gray, Duke. I think it always was. We're just finally being honest about it. The audience gasped. Wayne's face hardened. The real confrontation began. Honest? Wayne's voice rose, not shouting but intense. You think showing nothing but violence is honest? You think telling kids that heroes are just killers is honest? Clint's calm never wavered. I think showing them the world is complicated is honest. That good men do bad things. That survival isn't always pretty. That's nihilism, Wayne shot back. He was leaning forward now, fighting for something. That's tearing down everything that made this country great. The Western used to teach values. Now it just teaches cynicism. Carson tried to interject, but Wayne wasn't done. I spent my whole career showing young men what it meant to stand for something, to have a code, to protect the weak. And now, he pointed at Clint, that famous finger extended. Now they're learning that none of that matters, that it's all just a lie. The studio was dead silent. 50 million people were watching. Carson looked like he wanted to disappear, but Clint just sat there, his eyes never leaving Wayne's face. Is it a lie? Clint asked quietly. Wayne blinked. What? The code, the heroism, the clean morality. You've been in this business for 45 years, Duke. You've seen the real West in history books. Was it ever really like your movies? Wayne's mouth opened, closed. For the first time, he looked uncertain. The real cowboys were killers, thieves. The real lawmen shot people in the back. You know that. I know that. So who's lying? For a moment, Wayne said nothing. The silence stretched. Carson looked terrified. The audience held their breath. Then Wayne did something nobody expected. His face softened, just slightly. And in that second, everyone saw something they'd never seen before. Vulnerability. You're right, Wayne said quietly. The audience stirred. Carson's jaw dropped. Clint leaned forward, surprised. You're right, Wayne said again, louder. The real West wasn't like my movies. It was brutal. It was ugly. It was everything you show. He paused. His hands were shaking. But I'll tell you something, son. I knew that. I always knew that. The confession hung in the air. Then why? Clint asked. Not challenging. Genuinely curious. Wayne looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, there was no anger. Just something that looked like resignation. Or maybe relief. Because America needed heroes, Wayne said. After the Depression, after the war, after all the darkness, people needed to believe there was something good, something pure. So I gave them that. I gave them a lie. But it was a lie that made them better. He paused. Your Westerns, they're honest. They're real. But they're also dark. And I worry that if we only show darkness, people will forget that there can be light too. That honor and courage, they matter, even if they're rare. Especially because they're rare. Clint was quiet. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. They do matter, Duke. My characters aren't nihilists. They're survivors trying to find their own code. That's not darkness. That's hope. Wayne looked at Clint. Really looked at him. And slowly something changed in his expression. You know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe I've been so busy defending the past that I didn't see what you were building. You're not tearing down the Western. You're just telling a different truth. Clint smiled, a real smile. And your truth mattered too, Duke. It still does. My daughter watches your movies. They make her believe in things. That's not nothing. Wayne's eyes got slightly wet. He tried to hide it, but the camera caught it. I've been hard on you, publicly, and I shouldn't have been. What you're doing, it's brave. It's risky. And it's good. Then Wayne did something that stunned everyone. He extended his hand to Clint, not for a handshake, but placing it on Clint's shoulder, the gesture a father gives a son, a blessing. Keep making your Westerns, Wayne said, his voice thick. Make them honest, make them real. Just don't let people forget that heroes can exist too, even in the darkness. Clint put his hand over Wayne's. I won't! The audience erupted. Not in the excited way they had before, but in a deeper way. The way people applaud when they've witnessed something real. Carson had tears in his eyes. I think that might be the most important conversation I've ever hosted. Wayne and Clint sat back. The tension was gone. In its place was understanding, respect. They spent the next 5 minutes talking about filmmaking, about the craft. The conversation flowed naturally. When it ended, they stood together. Shook hands again, but this time it meant something different. John Wayne died 3 years later, in 1979. Clint Eastwood attended the funeral, privately, quietly. People who were there said Clint stood at the back, watching as Hollywood buried its greatest cowboy. And when it was over, he placed a small note on Wayne's casket. Nobody knows what it said. The Tonight Show appearance became legendary, the highest-rated episode of 1976. 50 million people watched it live. Hundreds of millions have seen it since. What made it special wasn't the conflict. It was the resolution. The moment when two men from different worlds found common ground. When the past and future shook hands and agreed they both mattered. Wayne's words that night changed how people saw his films. They stopped being naive fantasies and became intentional myths. Stories we tell to remind ourselves what we could be. Clint's words changed too. People started seeing the morality in his movies, the codes his characters followed, the honor buried under the violence. In 1992, Clint directed Unforgiven, a Western about an aging killer trying to escape his past, a film that honored both Wayne's heroism and the brutal reality of violence. When Clint won the Oscar for Best Director, he thanked several people, and at the end he added one more name, and John Wayne, for showing me that myths and truth don't have to be enemies. The confrontation on The Tonight Show wasn't a fight. It was a conversation America needed, about heroes and honesty, about myths and reality. 50 million people watched it happen, and nobody who saw it ever forgot what it felt like to witness two legends find respect in the last place anyone expected. On live television, admitting they were both right and both wrong. That's the real West. Complicated, surprising, and more human than any movie could ever be.